Ethan Cole hadn't planned to turn on the lights. He sat in darkness, a cold glass of bourbon in his hand, eyes fixed on the window overlooking the house next door. The porch light of the Langford residence had just gone out. 11:11 p.m. sharp, like every night. Not a minute earlier, not a minute late, a rhythm too precise to be casual. Ethan knew. He kept track of everything. In the small notebook next to the hidden camera behind his curtains, every movement of his neighbor was logged in neat, disciplined handwriting. It started with water running at night, then the flicker of light from the basement when the rest of the house was dark. Metal on metal, sharp sounds that had nothing to do with gardening tools. Tonight, Ethan decided not to write anything down. He just sat there, silent, listening. At 11:37 p.m. precisely, it happened. A muffled gasp, strangled mid-breath. Not a scream, the kind of sound that exists in the instant when the throat tries to cry out before being crushed. Ethan sprang up. The bourbon slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor, but he didn't care. His ears perked like a predator. Another noise, metal clattering, then silence, thick, oppressive silence, like the entire block had stopped breathing. He crept to the window, opening it just a crack to avoid the hinges squeaking. Cold air rushed in, carrying a pungent blend of chlorine, disinfectant, and something sweet and burnt, like roasting flesh that hadn't finished cooking. A faint light spilled from the basement window slit near the edge of the lawn. It didn't flicker, it didn't waver, like an operating light buried underground. Ethan stepped back slowly. He didn't hear anything else, but his heart was pounding, out of sync with the quiet around him. He moved to the storage closet, pulled open a drawer, and retrieved his infrared binoculars and audio amplifier headset. These weren't standard civilian gear. They were issued to him during his last tour in Kandahar. He'd kept them, not out of nostalgia, but because he knew someday he'd need them again. Back at the window, he donned the gear. Through the pale green hue of the binoculars, Langford's yard looked empty. Still, but sound didn't lie. Something was moving, something wet, something heavy. A faint dragging noise. Rubber wheels across concrete. One squeal, two, then a stop. Ethan ripped off the headset. He didn't breathe. He knew how it sounded, paranoid, absurd, but that noise, that damp shuffle, he'd heard it once before. On a mission, a locked container in the desert, full of migrants, most dead, the rest not entirely human anymore. He threw on his jacket, grabbed a tactical flashlight, and stepped out the back door. The grass was slick with dew. Each step sank slightly into the soft earth. The gate to Langford's yard wasn't locked. It hung ajar. The porch light buzzed dimly, yellow and sickly, like it had been coated in dried blood. He moved along the side of the house, staying flush with the wall. His hand gripped the flashlight, but he didn't turn it on. Instead, he listened. There was breathing, deep, damp, constrained. The kind of breathing you hear only when someone is forced into a position their body wasn't meant to hold. A kind of breath that didn't belong above ground. The basement door was ajar, unlocked, silent. Ethan pushed it gently. The stench hit him like a body blow, formalin, bleach, and the unmistakable aroma of charred human skin. He couldn't see anything yet, but the light from below cast a narrow beam up the staircase. The operating light was still on, and the first thing he saw when he stepped down one creaking stair was a small stainless steel tray. On it lay a human eyeball, moist, with sinew still attached, nestled gently on a square of white gauze, like a gemstone offered for some sacred ritual. Ethan didn't turn back. He kept walking. The first thing he noticed was the cold, not the kind that bites, the kind that wraps around your spine and stays there. Ethan descended the stairs slowly, his boots barely grazing the concrete steps. The flashlight in his hand remained off. There was enough light down here. A sterile, clinical beam from a surgical lamp suspended above a stainless steel table. The smell intensified. Not like a butcher's shop. This was older, like dried tissue sealed in formalin, preserved but never forgotten. Around him, the walls were covered with shelves, glass jars, some empty, some not. He reached the final step and crouched behind a support column. Directly in front of him, maybe 6 meters away, stood Dr. Langford. Gloved, gowned, and hunched over what looked like a patient on the table. The man was humming, softly, a slow, tuneless murmur. Ethan held his breath. Langford's hands moved with mechanical precision. He wasn't rushing, he wasn't experimenting. This was routine. A slice along the sternum, peeling back skin. A retractor clicked open, revealing muscle, then bone. He wasn't alone down here. Ethan shifted slightly and his shoulder bumped into something soft. He turned. It was a child-sized mannequin, or so he thought, but it wasn't plastic. The skin was too real, slightly wrinkled. The eyes were glass, but human-shaped. A preserved corpse dressed in a school uniform, arms posed to hug something that wasn't there. One of the fingers had stitching around the knuckle, and the nail was missing, a display. Ethan turned back to Langford, who was now carefully extracting the heart. No emotion. No hesitation, just a surgeon retrieving what he needed. The heart went into a metal bowl, placed beside several others, labeled date, age, notes. Ethan's throat clenched. Langford moved to a cabinet, opened it. Ethan saw them. Rows of faces, some dried like leather masks, some stored in preserving fluid, others stitched into bizarre collages, Frankenstein tapestries of cheeks, lips, and eyelids. He was building something, a pattern, a taxonomy of the human form. Ethan stepped back. His boots scraped the concrete. Langford froze, slowly turned his head. Their eyes met. Langford didn't shout. He didn't charge. He smiled. "You're early," the old man said. Ethan moved first. Not a thought, just instinct. His arm shot forward, flashlight gripped like a baton, aimed for Langford's temple. But the man wasn't surprised. He had prepared for this. As Ethan lunged, Langford stepped back, not in fear, but in calculation. His hand swept toward the surgical table. The edge of a scalpel flashed in the sterile light. Pain erupted across Ethan's side. A shallow slice, not deep but precise, enough to make him recoil, enough to throw off his balance. Langford didn't follow up with another strike. He didn't need to. He pressed a button on the wall. There was a click, a metallic hiss. The basement door above slammed shut. The staircase lit up in red. Ethan turned, ran, 2 steps up, then stopped. 3 figures were blocking the stairs. At first glance they looked human, dressed in patient gowns, but as they stepped into the light their forms were wrong. Too still, too stiff. Their skin was waxy, their movements synchronized. They weren't alive, but they were animated. Steel rods ran through their spines, pulleys embedded into their joints, a grotesque fusion of cadaver and machine. Their faces were blank, some stitched, some stapled, mouths stuck in frozen smiles. Langford's voice was calm from behind. "They can't feel, they don't resist. Perfect cooperation." The puppets moved down 1 step at a time, each motion triggered by cables embedded in the walls. Ethan backed down, breathing hard. The blood from his side was spreading now, darkening his shirt. He turned and sprinted deeper into the basement. It wasn't a basement, it was a labyrinth. Corridors made of drywall and steel doors. Each room was a cell. Each door had a small window, and behind every window, someone watched. Some had mouths sewn shut. Some had no mouths at all. One was tapping the glass rhythmically. Tap, tap, tap. It matched the pulse in Ethan's ears. He took a turn. Another door. It opened. And then darkness. Hands grabbed him. Something sharp jabbed into his neck. Coldness spread. A numb wave. His body betrayed him. Legs gave out. Arms dropped. He collapsed like a broken puppet, twitching. Langford stood over him, calm, gentle, still smiling. "I won't hurt you, Ethan," he said. "I'm going to fix you." Darkness swallowed everything. The pain had become a language, not a scream, not a cry, but a lexicon of sensation. Each cut, each pull, each tightening of suture thread was a syllable. Ethan no longer reacted to it. He listened, he learned. Something had shifted inside him, not broken, not shattered, but reorganized. The table was cold, his skin was colder. Langford worked without rush. A pair of micro-scalpels danced in his hands. The left side of Ethan's face had been opened, peeling back the skin with surgical precision to expose the underlying tissue. Muscles gleamed wetly under the operating light, twitching in rhythm with each heartbeat. Above him, a mounted monitor displayed Ethan's face in real time, split-screened. On the left, the current state, flesh unpeeled, stitches halfway complete. On the right, a rendered projection of what Langford called the symmetry standard. "You were born asymmetrical," Langford murmured, voice detached, clinical. "But I forgive you. Evolution is messy. Nature tolerates flaws. I do not." He reached for a clamp. pinched the skin near Ethan's jawline, adjusted it, restitched the inner dermal layer at a higher point. Ethan's vision swam. He couldn't feel his tongue. The anesthesia wasn't local, it was neurological. Langford had injected something that paralyzed speech, but left awareness intact. A clear window into horror. "I'm not hurting you," Langford whispered, leaning close enough for Ethan to feel his breath. "I'm refining you." Behind him in the gloom, other tables awaited. Other patients. One was missing an entire lower half, suspended on hooks, arteries sealed, head moving slowly side to side in a permanent nod. Another had no skin, the muscle glistening like lacquered red silk. Yet her eyes followed Ethan wherever he moved. They were all awake. They had all been educated. Langford finished the facial reconstruction and stepped back, admiring his work. "You look closer now," he said. Ethan blinked once, the only movement he could make. Langford leaned forward and whispered, "You see it, don't you? The logic. The peace that comes with order, with elimination of defect." He turned on a second screen. Footage played. Ethan. Moments from his life, stitched together from hidden cameras, eating alone, showering, cleaning his guns, crying in the dark. "You were already broken, Ethan. I'm not destroying you. I'm aligning you." He stepped back into the shadows. From above, soft mechanical arms descended, each tipped with different tools. Suture guns, dermal lasers, microblades. Langford's voice came from everywhere now, through hidden speakers. "Now, let's fix the spine curvature, that slouch, that old war wound. You don't need it anymore." Ethan's back arched as a cold clamp snapped around his neck. The machine began humming. And for the first time, Ethan did not resist, because part of him agreed. Because part of him had always hated the imperfection. Because part of him was beginning to become Langford. When the machine stopped humming, Ethan wasn't sure how much time had passed. The overhead light had dimmed, replaced by a soft bluish glow that made everything look sterile, dreamlike. His body no longer hurt, not because it had healed, but because the pain had evolved into something else, a background frequency he could no longer distinguish from thought. He lay motionless, not from restraints. Those were gone, but from disorientation. The surgical table was now upright, supporting him like a display. Mirrors surrounded him, every angle of his modified face, the perfectly even cheekbones, the realigned jaw. The sutures were still visible, but the symmetry was immaculate. Langford entered the room with a clipboard and a calmness that no longer felt artificial. He was in his element. "You're recovering faster than expected," he said, jotting something down. "I believe your body was always ready, it just needed the blueprint." Ethan tried to speak, but his throat released only a soft rasp. "You'll speak again soon. Articulation is delicate business," Langford said. "For now, listen." He gestured toward a digital monitor. It displayed rows of files, Connecticut scans, MRI slices, facial reconstructions, posture simulations. It was a catalog of Ethan. Every bone, every scar, every deviation from the standard. "You are the prototype," Langford continued. "The last attempt failed. Too much resistance, too much ego. But you, Ethan, you understand pain. You respect order. You will be the first to carry the correction." Ethan's mind reeled. A prototype for what? Langford tapped a button. The wall shifted. Behind it, dozens of figures stood in suspended animation. Transparent pods lined the room, each containing a human body mid-transformation. Some had missing limbs, others had restructured spines. None had faces yet. "You see?" Langford said, almost reverently. "This is the future of mankind. Not rebirth, refinement, not cloning, curation." Ethan stared at the pods, their contents grotesquely still. "You will lead them," Langford said, "once the final graft is complete." A chill cut through Ethan's blood. "Final graft?" Langford nodded. He wheeled in a tray, and on it, beneath the surgical cloth, was something Ethan recognized. His own face, removed, perfected, preserved. The face stared back at him, his face, suspended in a nutrient solution, its skin pale and intact, eyelids gently shut, lips slightly parted as if mid-thought, a flawless mask, a perfected mockery. Langford held it like a relic. "We will place it back on, but only after your interior has earned it. Perfection must begin within." Ethan didn't move. His body obeyed, but his mind resisted. Beneath the layers of surgical serenity, something primal clawed against the logic. "You will assist in the next trial," Langford said, pushing Ethan gently toward a second surgical table. A girl lay on it, maybe 16, eyes vacant, limbs twitching under sedation. Tubes ran into her veins and her skin had already been mapped with surgical lines, dotted curves across her cheeks, markings on her ribcage, labels for removal. Ethan was handed a scalpel. His hands moved as if not his own. The gloves were his size, the instruments familiar. Langford stood beside him, not as a captor, but as a mentor. "Begin with the submandibular extraction. Then we'll refine the orbital shelf." Ethan looked down at the girl. She blinked. Still alive, still aware. He hesitated. Langford's voice lowered. "You want to escape? Then prove yourself. Think like the future, not the past." Ethan's hand hovered. The scalpel trembled. He made the first incision. Just under the chin, a small cut, not deep but precise. Blood welled up and the girl whimpered under sedation. Langford watched, nodding slowly. "That's it. See how clean it is? Controlled, purposeful." Ethan swallowed. The room was too quiet. He made a second cut, this time near the eye socket. Skin peeled with tweezers, fat glistened beneath. The girl twitched again. Langford leaned in. "Do you feel it? That's what separates us from them. Precision over passion." Ethan placed the scalpel down. Then he picked up the bone chisel. Langford smiled. "Yes." But Ethan didn't use it on the girl. He turned, fast, clean, and slammed it into Langford's neck. The sound was wet, sharp. A cough of blood exploded across Ethan's chest as Langford staggered back, eyes wide, not with fear, but with betrayal. Ethan didn't wait. He grabbed the surgical tray, hurled it into the light rig above, shattering it in sparks. Then he ran, down the corridor of frozen bodies, past the Symmetry archives, into the black. Langford's voice followed him, garbled from the intercom, choking, wounded, laughing. "You still chose the method, Ethan! You still followed the pattern!" Ethan didn't stop. He didn't look back. But somewhere inside he knew Langford was right. The lights flickered as Ethan burst through a steel door and slammed it shut behind him. No alarms, no footsteps, just the hum of electricity and his own breath scraping through a raw throat. The room he entered wasn't another lab. It was quiet. It was colder. Rows of tall filing cabinets stretched from wall to wall. Refrigerated shelves lined the edges, blinking with temperature gauges. A metal desk in the center, dusty but functional. And in the far corner, screens, dozens of them, all flickering with security feeds, paused images, frozen lives. Ethan limped to the desk. His hands trembled as he activated the central terminal. A logo flashed. Langford Systems, Human Form Restructuring Index, then access granted. What unfolded in front of him wasn't a record of torture, it was a manifesto, a catalog of human deviation, folders labeled asymmetry outliers, psychogenic imperfection, emotional instability by facial architecture. Each entry was paired with a name, a photo, a body. Most were marked incomplete. Ethan found one labeled Cole Ethan. He opened it. Photos of him shaving, x-rays from months ago, ECG data, notes on his military service, diagrams overlaying corrections to his skull and spine. The title read, Phase 3, Integrated Host. He scrolled further. There were others, faces he recognized. The boy who used to bike around the neighborhood, the mother across the street, the postal worker. They were all here, not murdered. Asterisk, asterisk, repurposed, dot, asterisk, asterisk. Their bodies had been reshaped and integrated into the puppets, the storage tanks, even the infrastructure. Teeth used in moldings, eyes wired to cameras, hair woven into filter systems. Langford hadn't killed them. He had asterisk, asterisk, distributed them, asterisk, asterisk. Ethan stared at the screen until the edges blurred. Then he found the live feed of the main chamber. Langford was standing, still alive, neck bleeding, wrapped in gauze. He looked directly into the camera and smiled. "You found the archive," he said, voice scratchy through the speakers. "That means you're ready to understand." The screen went black, then flashed. Asterisk, asterisk, phase 4. Uprising, asterisk, asterisk. A countdown appeared. Ethan backed away from the desk. The temperature began to drop, and behind him, one of the refrigerated cabinets began to open. Frost curled across the steel floor as the refrigerated unit opened with a hiss. Ethan stepped back, flashlight raised, breath steaming in the air. Inside lay a man, naked, gaunt. His skin was pale and veined with surgical scars, but his eyes were alive. The man gasped, then coughed, then whispered, "Help! Us!" Ethan pulled him out, wrapped a discarded lab coat around the shivering frame. "How many?" The man pointed with a trembling hand. "All of them. They're still breathing, barely." Ethan scanned the archive, each pod, each cabinet. Not corpses. ***prisoners. ***failed experiments. Mutated subjects, imperfect grafts, all kept frozen, waiting for either refinement or disposal. He moved fast. One by one, he triggered the emergency overrides. Locks hissed open. Cold gas vented, limbs twitched, groans filled the room. The half-limbed, the stitched, the eyeless. They crawled, shuffled, screamed. They remembered what was done to them. And they were not merciful. Ethan armed himself with a surgical saw and led them through the corridor. A horde of broken bodies, dragging IV lines and steel braces spilling into Langford's halls like a tide of rot. Langford tried to seal the doors. Too late. The malform breached every entrance. They tore through the symmetry vault. They shattered the display cases. Langford's puppets fought back, but without coordination. Ethan severed the control lines. Sparks rained down. Screams echoed across the steel. In the chaos, Ethan found Langford standing before the core chamber. He was bleeding from his neck, his hand clutching a remote. "You don't understand," Langford said, almost pleading. "They need structure. They crave it. I'm the only one who ever gave them purpose." Ethan raised the saw. "You gave them cages." Langford pressed the remote. Explosives, hidden in the walls, armed. A 5-minute countdown flashed red across every screen. Ethan rushed forward. Langford swung. The two men crashed into the surgical table. Blood smeared the steel. Ethan drove the saw into Langford's gut. The doctor convulsed, then collapsed. Ethan grabbed the remote. Deactivation required retinal scan. Langford's eye. Ethan didn't hesitate. He took it. The retinal scan worked. The countdown stopped at 0:14. Silence fell. Ethan dropped the blood-soaked remote. Around him, the few survivors, disfigured, limping, breathing through tubes, stared at him as if waiting for orders. Not because they trusted him, because they recognized something. Ethan wasn't one of them anymore. He was something in between. He led them through the emergency tunnels. Narrow steel ducts beneath the foundation, lined with discarded limbs, broken instruments, forgotten blueprints. Every breath scraped the lungs. Every vibration could trigger collapse. One woman couldn't keep up. She begged to be left. Ethan carried her. Another turned feral, tried to bite him. He restrained her. At the tunnel's end, a grate opened into the forest. Moonlight hit his skin for the first time in days. They emerged in a clearing. Naked, scarred, alive, the house behind them was already burning, set aflame by one of the failed subjects. A beacon of everything Langford tried to hide. Ethan stared into the fire, then down at his hands. Steady, too steady. He reached up, touched his face. Perfect symmetry. He wanted to scream, but he didn't. Instead, he turned to the others, and they followed. 2 years later, the Langford house was gone, burned to ash. The investigation had yielded nothing. Official reports blamed a gas leak. No bodies were recovered. No one ever came forward. But Ethan knew the truth. He watched the rebuilt street from behind mirrored windows. The neighborhood had changed. Families moved in. Children played. Lawns were trimmed. Everything looked normal. But Ethan was not. He lived quietly now, alone. Unassuming, yet every morning he adjusted the symmetry of his reflection. Every night he catalogued his neighbor's flaws, a twitch in the mailman's eye, a crooked smile on the girl across the street, a scar on a jogger's leg. He wrote it all down, not in fear, not in trauma, but in precision, in calm, in purpose, because deep within the reconstructed corridors of his mind, Langford still whispered, and Ethan was no longer resisting. He was refining ***. He was building something beneath the house, and at exactly 11:11 p.m. every night his lights went out, right on time, the end.